Okay, welcome back. In the last video, what we looked at doing was starting to add an administrator role into the system. And what that meant was that if we log in as an administrator, it would take us to a view that an administrator should be able to see, because it has a lot of other, it has a list of all the volunteers and their contact information and whatnot. But if we logged in with a regular user, we wouldn't be able to see that information. We'd go straight to the ability to log some hours. So there was a few challenges that this presents. One of them is that when we create a new volunteer, we have to be able to set them up as an administrator, right? So when we're going to this new volunteer view, we really need to be able to have that radio button, but we should only be able to get there if we're an administrative user. So let's look at that right now. Let's go and evolve that view so that we can deal with that. So if we have our view, so where's our new user view controller? Okay, and let's bring up the view itself. So here we have a vertical box, and inside the vertical box, we have a couple horizontal boxes, and here's a grid pane that holds all the information about the user. And really what we need to do here is we need to add in another area, which is the ability for the person to be a administrative user or not. So right click, add row below. It's a little congested, so click on our H box. Just make it a little bit bigger here. And we can add in controls. Maybe that word's too big. Let's say administrator. And in here we can put in like a checkbox, right? So we could just right. So just be like a little box that we check. So we hit save. So now our view is set up, and what we need to do now is we need to update our controller, and we're going to need to update our actual model class to support this. Right now our model class doesn't actually support this concept of being an administrator or not. We only have it represented in the database. So we'll have to add this in two spots. So let's do the controller first. So here's our new user view controller. And we won't worry about initializing it just yet. But at the top, we're going to need to handle that checkbox. So okay, so I'm adding this in here so that we can connect our view to our controller. So we're going to go hit save, go back to our view. Now when we go down to code, we can add that ID, save. Okay, so now where we need to use this is when we're creating a new user. So if they hit the save button, we need to read from this now. Okay, so let's go down to search for save, and it brings us to our method save button pushed. Okay, so if it's a valid password, right? So we had a method check that. And we are validating here whether we're updating or editing an existing user, or if we're creating a new volunteer. And right now, with our volunteer, our volunteer class itself doesn't support the idea of being in min or not in min. So we need to change our volunteer class. And we have a couple options here. One is in the constructor, we can explicitly call it out. Now, if we do that, what will happen is you'll have to change everywhere that we create a new instance of a volunteer, or we're going to need to, which is probably the most explicit way of doing it, or we're going to need to create a method, to basically get and set that whether or not they're an admin. I think what I'm going to do, because it'll force me to change it everywhere, is to actually put it in as part of my default constructor. So I'm going to say Boolean admin as one of the attributes here, and then I'm going to go to my base constructor, which is this one. I'm going to modify it. Okay, so I'm going to add in here Boolean admin. Okay, so whether that's true or false, now all of our default all of our constructors will force us to have this. And that will break this constructor. So I'm going to add it in here as well. Okay, so we also need to add in, so I'm going to just go insert code and our getters and setters for that field, generate it. It's going to create these two little methods for us. So now our volunteer can handle being an administrative user or not an administrative user. And that's going to break basically all of our controllers. So we need to go back in. You can see all of our controllers have gone into red now. So we need to handle that. So we'll just click through these one at a time. We'll start with our new volunteer here. So in this one, in the table view, it creates a new volunteer. And so what we need to do is we need to handle that. So we're going to say result set. Boolean. And what we're going to look for is the field called admin. Okay, so now our our table view controller is fixed. Our login view controller is going to be very similar, kind of a solution here. So we're going to go in, and we'll get the information from the database and fill in the admin field. And then our new user view controller is also broken. Now here, we have two new types of volunteer. We have one if the image is changed, and one if they have the default image. So the default image is that sort of basic one here. So we can go to our checkbox. So I forget what I called it. What did I call it? Admin checkbox, okay? I can go to that field in our view. You can get it is checked or is clicked, but it is not. It is selected. Okay. So if it is selected, then it's going to return true. If it's not selected, it's going to return false. So here we go. And then the last one here is our default, or sorry, our view where we have this custom image file. And if I look back, we have the custom image. We put that right before the password. So here's our password field. So we're going to say admin checkbox is selected. Save. So let's see if there's anything else. No, nothing else in red. So if all is well, we should be able to create a new user now. And we're going to test it with both an administrative user and a non-administrative user. So I'm going to log in as an administrative user. I'm going to say create new volunteer. And we're going to say admin user. And I'm going to check the box to say admin and hit save. Okay, so it comes back. We can see there's our administrative user here. And if I go into our database, where to go? There it is. Okay, go through our table. If I scroll down, ooh, look at this. Although it created our admin user, it didn't actually set the admin value properly. So we need to find out why that is. So let's go back into our volunteer app. This part should be fine for our controller. So it's most likely something going wrong in our actual model class. Just going to move these two methods. I like to keep all my constructors together. Okay, so we need to think about, well, what could go wrong? We have our constructors. There's not a lot that could have gone wrong in there. But something went wrong when we went to put this into the database, right? So let's go look at how we insert into the database. So I'm just going to search for insert. And we have our method insert into database. And here, when we insert this into the database, you can see we say insert into volunteers, first name, last name, phone number, birthday, image files, password, salt. But we never actually handle the checkbox. So we'll add a field called admin. And we're going to have to add one more question mark here. And then when we're building our prepared statement, we now need to handle that extra little checkbox. So I put it as the very last item. So down here, you need to say prepared statement. And this one's set to Boolean. And it's item number 8. And it's going to be the admin, right? Whether admin is true or false. So hit save. So let's see if that solves our problem. So we got our other user here. Let's go into our database, update our query. And now we've been able to create a new administrative user, and it shows that they're populated. So now we should also check it to make sure if we create a non-administrative user, that should be a 0. Okay, so non-administrative user, I hit save. They went in as well. And here we can see in our database that they're added and their administrative status is a 0. And if I log in, that's user number 15. We're taken to a non-administrative screen. So, so that's working as we expected. So I'm happy to see that. In the next video, we'll start dealing with some of these other use cases around having administrative and non-administrative roles. Cheers.